What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and today we're going to be talking about the brand new NCAA Division I hockey eligibility rules.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the strength.
All right, so if you haven't heard, there's some pretty earth-shattering news yesterday where the NCAA Division I Council voted to extend eligibility to CHL hockey players. Now, this is pretty unprecedented because since forever, these kids have all been ruled ineligible because the NCAA deemed that they were professional athletes because they are paid a stipend to play. So unlike, I guess, the NIL deals where these kids just happen to be paid not because they're playing, but for advertising and things like that. This was direct payment for playing the sport of hockey, and so they've not been able to play. They are not considered amateurs by the NCAA. But that all changed yesterday, and that's good news. It's going to open up the pool of applicants as far as the NCAA goes for Division I hockey by about 1,100 players. So if you're not aware of what the CHL is, it is a major junior hockey league. So it's 20U or U20 up in Canada, and it is the highest level. It's considered Tier 1 hockey. And these kids actually, they get paid. Now, it's not a lot of money. It's like $250. I think a month is the cap. So you're looking at like $125 bi-weekly. And if you were to break that down, it is not quite even minimum wage, I think, which is why it's called a stipend and it's not a salary, because there's some work laws that you'd have to get around to pay somebody that little. And then the work requirements, I would guess as well, because these kids are practicing and playing, might exceed the overall allowance for those things up in Canada. But again, this is big news. It's going to completely change the development landscape for the entirety of North America, not just Canada. It's going to have some pretty resounding effects in the United States as well. So why did this happen? There's been some antitrust law lawsuits filed against the NCAA on behalf of some of these CHL kids over the past year, and a lot of it has to do with the NIL deals. So if you're not really sure what an NIL deal, NIL stands for name, image, likeness, and in the recent years, as of 2020, NCAA athletes are allowed to use their name, image, and likeness to make money, right? So they're not directly being paid to be an athlete. They're not really being paid by the school, but they can earn money from outside sources, mostly for marketing purposes. You see a lot of these kids are starting to monetize their social medias, and that's where like 90% of the money is coming from. And it's big business for a lot of these kids. So it got to the point where it was probably pretty hard for the NCAA to continue to argue that these kids that are making $125 bi-weekly at the absolute most aren't allowed to play, while you've got some NCAA athletes collecting millions of dollars every year to play a sport. I think really what the final nail in the coffin was for that was last year. I think as of the end of last school year, 43 states, including Washington, D.C., now allow for high school NIL deals, right? So you can be in high school and have an NIL deal, and it's completely legal, and then you're able to go on to play at the NCAA level. And again, some of these kids are monetizing their social media to the tunes of 6 and 7 figures, right? So this kid is able to make $1 million a year on his socials playing high school football, but the kid who's making $125 bi-weekly playing in the Canadian Hockey League is not allowed to. And so I think they kind of forced their hand. So I know USA Hockey has been kind of dreading and preparing themselves for this over the past couple of years, because it's going to have pretty big impacts, especially on the USHL and the National Team Development Program. I talked with some of the executives at the 17s Dev Camp over the summer, and they didn't seem happy about it, but they kind of understood why it was going in that direction. And I think a lot of people, even in the United States, want to see this happen because it's going to completely and totally change the game in the best possible ways. In addition to like the NIL deals kind of leading to this, you also have the NHL CBA, which is up for renewal, or the current one expires in September of 2026. And this is inevitably going to have to be a part of that, because some of these kids that play in the CHL are on NHL contracts. even though they're playing down at the CHL level. So there's probably going to be some kind of change as to how those contracts work when kids, like I said, are under contract but are still playing in the CHL. So that was probably another reason why this move happened when it did. It gives these organizations, or the NHLPA, and I would assume the CHLPA, some time to negotiate what they think is going to be necessary to make this thing run smoothly. Let's see. Yeah, so those are the biggest reason it happened. I believe that the CBA probably played like a little role, but the NIL deals are 100% the reason why this happened. And it's really, like I said, hard to make the argument that these kids shouldn't be able to play when they're collecting. I mean, you do the math, it's probably $4 or $5 an hour. While you can have, what's her name? Olivia Dunn collecting $5-6 million a year as a gymnast. She actually decided to stay in college for one more year so that she could continue to monetize her social media in the way that she is. Because honestly, like when it comes to gymnastics, once you leave the college level, it's not quite as interesting for most people. You've got the Olympics that happen once every 4 years, and that's where people really pay attention. But world championships and things like that, those aren't typically on TV, and most people, your average American, doesn't really care. Gymnastics is a fairly niche sport. So she stayed so that she can continue to make money, which I get it. It's a good idea for her. And if you, I'll link at the very end of this in the cards, there will be a link to the NIL episode that I did a while back. And then I'll put a link in the description as well. All right, so now we know what happened and kind of why it happened. So let's talk about the consequences here. What are the consequences? Well, the player pool is expanded. You're going to now have 1,100 more kids vying for these college hockey scholarships at the NCAA level. And there's some good news at the NCAA as well, because they've now just expanded the allotment of, scholarships to 26, right? So they're allowed to now offer 26. That doesn't mean every school is going to. You have some, like the Atlantic Hockey, they're not moving to 26. I think they're staying at 17. Then you've got the Ivy Leagues who don't offer any scholarships. For athletics, you can get money in many other ways. But, there's going to be more opportunity for these kids to continue to play after they get done playing in the CHL. And it's going to be a little messy this coming year, because you do have a lot of kids who maybe went the USHL route or could have played in the CHL and decided that they were going to go the North American League route so that they could still be eligible to play at the college level, and they may end up getting bypassed by some kid who went on to play in the OHL or the Dub or the Q and developed a little bit more. You're probably going to see a ton of colleges now looking to bring these kids in, which is good. But again, in the short term, it gets a little messy for somebody who didn't make that decision. And, that part of it is what it is. You're also going to see a shift in levels of hockey, right? So you're going to have the major junior kids now are eligible to play at the NCAA level. And then that's 1,100 more kids. And it just... everything kind of goes down a notch when that happens, right? So you've got on par with the USHL, the Quebec Major Junior League, maybe a little bit below the USHL. But you'll have kids who do play in the USHL who may not have the opportunity to play at the Division I level now because these other kids have entered the fray. You may have some kids that have committed who may end up getting de-offered from the university because they can now sign these other kids who may be a better fit for their program or who may be a better player. That's not going to be great for those American kids, but it is a possibility and something, that should happen if the other kid is a better player and a better fit for that university. But that goes all the way down the chain, right? So now you've got, like I said, major junior kids eligible to play. Some of those kids who would have played at the Division I level will now be possibly playing at the Division III level or one of those Division II programs. I think there's still like 7 or 8 of them, which is going to take some of those kids who would have played at the Division II, Division III level, and it's going to push them down into the club ranks of the ACHA and AAU hockey. So lots of changes. For the better, that the product at the NCAA level is going to be better, which is great for the game all across the board, but it is going to kind of box some of these kids out who are maybe on the bubble of being able to play at the NCAA level, and it is what it is. It'll be rough for the American kids, but at the same time, I think you're going to start to see some openings in the non-traditional markets. So I think you're going to see some of these California teams in the Big Ten, like the UCLA and USC, start to think really hard about putting together an NCAA Division I team, which could, again, be great for the sport because there's more opportunity. There's more kids watching. Not everybody can afford to go to like a Los Angeles Kings game, but maybe you could afford to go to a UCLA Bruins game. And now this kid falls in love with hockey, and you got the next Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid playing who otherwise might not have played. You've also got, and people always kind of give me weird looks when I say this, but the SEC, that's like, they would kill it in hockey. If you're a kid who's coming out of now playing major junior, tier 1, tier 2 junior in the United States, and you've got an option to play at Boston College, right, or Michigan, or let's say like Lake State, right, and you're scraping ice off your windshield or you're shoveling snow just to get out of the driveway every single morning, or you could go to the University of Florida, or even Alabama, or a Florida school somewhere where it's nice and sunny, maybe Athens, Georgia, to play for the Bulldogs. If those are your options, which option sounds better to you? For me, I would exponentially rather be in a pretty big hockey town, or not hockey town, but a pretty big like sports town, and have good weather, as opposed to the other way around. I think you'll see schools in Florida will really think hard about putting together programs. You've got Florida Gulf Coast, who I think will probably be the first NCAA program in the state of Florida. That could be something, that they decide is an avenue that they want to go down. University of Miami, USF's had a team for about 30 some odd years now. I actually played there for 3 years when I got done playing my NCAA hockey. Tallahassee, the Leon Civic Center is piped for ice. UF could very easily put together some funds to make a hockey program. There's a ton of possibilities out there. So I think the consequences of this are mostly good because it's going to open the door for more programs, right? But again, like I said, there are some kids that are going to be left behind, and there's some parents right now that are furious that their kids are now going to have to compete against all these Canadian kids for spots. And that is what it is. It's going to make the whole model for development different here in the United States. It's going to make kids have to work harder and get better, and it's going to make organizations have to pull in better coaches. Like, this is a win-win-win all the way around, and I think to be upset by it because you think it's going to impact your kids' chances of playing in college I get it, but I think they're short-sighted, right? All right, so those are most of the consequences. So who's going to be benefiting from all this, right? A lot of these NCAA programs will, because they will be able to put a better program on the ice, right? That's going to be first and foremost. I think that's a win for all of the NCAA and every school that already has a program. Canadian-born players, right? Because now you don't have to make the decision to leave Ontario, if you're a kid who's from Ontario, to go play in the United States just because you want to play at the NCAA level. You can now stay and play at, quote unquote, at home. You don't have to leave the country to go play. So Canadian players, they get, let's say, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So let's say like 4 or 5 years of development in the CHL, and then now they can go on to play at the NCAA level, which would be 4 to 5 more years if you're a redshirter kid who's not going to get a lot of playing time or you get injured. That's 4 to 5 extra years of development, which could be really good for some of those kids, especially some of the quote-unquote late bloomers. Excuse me. Like I said, NCAA hockey absolutely benefits more players, better product. Most players in general will, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Agents and advisors is going to be a big boom for them because you're going to have a lot more opportunities for a lot of kids. I think this is going to be a big boom for the advisors and the agents. just all the way around. More kids eligible to play at the NCAA level means, more parents are going to be making some decisions based on that. You may have a kid who was thinking about going to play at a prep school, who now maybe flirts with going to play in the OHL or the WHL or the Quebec Maritime Junior League. So again, more things to navigate through, more opportunity for these agents and family advisors. But I think who benefits the absolute most is going to be the U.S. development model, right? Because I don't know what it's like throughout the rest of the country, but here in Florida, we've got this thing completely backwards. And a lot of times these kids, especially down where I'm at, physical preparation is the furthest thing from the minds of the parents. It is a skill. Got to get on the ice, got to develop hands, got to develop all this stuff with total neglect of any physical preparation. By the time they get to like 15, 16, 17, they're like, oh man, I'm not strong enough. I'm not fast enough. I got to go try to do that now. And by then it's entirely too late. I think this move is going to make them put a little bit more emphasis on that earlier on. And I think USA Hockey is going to have to spearhead that effort, right? But I think this could, if done the right way, if handled the right way, if we respond the right way to this happening, it could be great for the what's called the ADM, or the American Development Model. So lastly, right, that's who benefits. Who gets hurt? Well, Tier 2 and Tier 3 American-born players, for the most part. Right now, you've got a billion Tier 3 pay-to-play programs throughout the country, and what they're essentially going to turn into development programs for almost exclusively club hockey, right? There's just not going to be the opportunity to climb the ladder from Tier 3 all the way up even to the NCAA or NCAA Division 3 level, because you're going to have some of those kids playing in the BCHL and the AJHL and the USHL and the North American League are going to get kind of punted down to the Division 3 level, with these new 1,100 kids having the opportunity to play at the Division 1 level. It just is what it is. So that will hurt these programs, but I think in the long run it's better, because junior hockey is so watered down now, it's not even funny. It'll kind of separate the strong from the weak, and maybe we will get a better product as far as a better service, rather, of development from these Tier 3 programs, because they won't be able to sustain themselves. Because at the end of the day, if you're a parent, am I going to pay $12,000 a year for my kid to develop so that they can have the opportunity to play club hockey? Probably not, right? So hopefully that's an outcome of this. Anyone who doesn't adapt quickly enough to this is going to get hurt, right? And like I said, the way that the United States responds, or USA Hockey responds to this, is going to dictate a lot. If we can get out ahead of this as far as like developing our young talent goes, I think we've got a really good shot at this being a huge plus and opening doors all throughout the country in the non-traditional markets for some of these universities to say, hey, we could make some money doing hockey. Let's go ahead and do it. And again, that just creates more opportunity. So I think if we can figure it out, get out in front of it and adapt the right way and adapt quickly, it can be a great thing. So those who choose not to adapt are going to be kind of left behind, and that's fine. I think USA Hockey gets hurt a little bit in this, merely because a lot of kids go to the USHL specifically to play. Not a lot. There's 20 kids, 23 kids, 25 kids. To play on the 17 and 18U National Development Program team. They may decide not to do that now, because the biggest, outside of wearing your country's colors, the biggest reason to go that route would be to play at the NCAA level, right? Because those kids pretty much essentially have their pick of where they want to play when it comes to NCAA. So it might make kids decide that, hey, I'm going to go play in the OHL instead, because I think that's a better route for me. But we'll see. Again, kids could still play on the 17s and 18s team and then go on to play in the OHL and then come back and play NCAA. So it's not necessarily going to be the case, but it will be enticing a lot of kids who are maybe 16, 17, who are like, man, I could go play up in London, right? It'd be a dream come true for like 90% of kids. And it's very different from playing from your country, but you're playing in front of like 70,000 people every night. It's a pretty big deal. Those kids are like celebrities in those towns. So just simple fact that some kids may choose to go that route instead of the national development team, which, is what it is. And then lastly, I think youth sports gets hurt a little bit here because as of right now, if you play in the OHL and you don't sign a pro contract, or the O, the W, or the Q, and you don't sign a pro contract, your options when you graduate are pretty much to go play the Canadian equivalent of NCAA, which is youth sports. Now, the CHL itself has a pretty good program. So for every year that you play in the CHL, you get a year of school paid for. So you could end up, if you played long enough, with like a full ride. But that once you get done with your last year, like your eligibility for utilizing those scholarships actually starts. So you would have to make a decision, if I'm going to go play pro, or I'm going to go try and play in Europe, or am I going to go to school and utilize this free tuition that I've been given. But I do think youth sports probably gets hurt a little bit because now those kids are going to have the opportunity to go play at the NCAA level. But at the same time, like I said earlier, even though there are allotted 26 possible scholarships per team, not every team's going to do it. So you'll get some kids who are like, I'm not going to bootstrap myself with $100,000 in debt to go play in America. I will just stay home and go to school for what amounts to free. So I don't. A lot of people are saying youth sports is going to take a huge hit. I really don't see it. It'll be some. Like everything's going to change a little bit, but I don't think it ends up being too big of a hit. So the benefits, again, the advisors and the agents, the Canadian-born players, NCAA hockey, and hockey fans in general, and the U.S. development model, along with most players in the long run, I think all benefit. USA Hockey, youth sports, Tier 2 and Tier 3 players here in the United States are going to take a pretty big hit. And then anyone who doesn't adapt quickly enough, that's who's going to get hurt. That's going to be it. I think we got through everything today. Again, it's a pretty neat thing. I think this is important. I think these kids playing the CHL have been denied entirely too long their ability to play at the NCAA level, and that's all changed now, which is great. Nothing but positives for the game. I think all across the board, everything gets better from here on out. More players, more teams, more growth, non-traditional markets, seeing some college programs, and that could be enormous for the sport of hockey, even at the NHL level, because now you may have kids, like I said, I talked about Georgia earlier, going to school in Athens, Georgia, who are now enormous hockey fans because they went, on Friday and Saturday nights to go watch the team play at the old barn down there, and now they're hooked. So nothing but good coming from this, outside of some of the hurt feelings of the parents who think their kids are now going to be left by the wayside, and they might. Just, it is what it is. Game's going to get better, so it's good for everybody. Trying to think, anything to clean up here. Look in the next month, I've got my Total Hockey Training book coming out. I am 8 chapters in. I'm about 200 pages through. This thing's going to be a monster. It's going to be a good read. We're going to try to keep the cost down. But I think it'll be essential reading for anybody who wants to play the game or anybody who wants to coach kids who play the game. It's going to be all inclusive, everything from like strength training to speed training to mobility work to conditioning and even skating. All of it's going to be covered in this book. There'll be some like example programs and stuff like that. So if you are interested, keep an eye out for that. I think before Christmas it'll happen. As long as I can get it edited in time. I also have exercises in futility. There's a link for it on my website, but it's going to be probably early next year before that gets done. I got a pretty big conversation next week with an organization that may push the online stuff forward in a pretty big way pretty quickly, so we can look out for that in the new year. Man, where did the year go? It is November 8th. It is wild. But at the end of this, there'll be a couple cards, if you're watching on YouTube, of some episodes that go in line with this. If you're feeling a little bit lost, I'll put links in the description to all the episodes I talked about here. That is it. We will see you next time. I hope everybody has a good weekend because this should be coming out on a Friday.
I don't want to hear you, 'cause you cannot master the strength.